Disclaimer. The information and education material contained herein is meant to promote the general understanding and dialogue of GANs processing. Such information is not meant or intended to serve as a substitute for a healthcare professional's clinical training, experience, or judgment. For patients and individuals, such information is not to be a substitute for professional medical, therapeutic, or healthcare advice or counseling. For medical issues or concerns, including decisions about medications and other treatments, readers, viewers, listeners should always consult their physician or, in serious cases, seek immediate assistance from emergency personnel. Prescription information, procedures, and use of medical devices information should be undertaken only by properly trained and certified medical personnel. We specifically disclaim any warranties, express or implied, including implied warranties of merchantability or fitness for a particular purpose. Such information is provided, as is, and is believed to be accurate at the time of its publishing, but it is the viewer's job to evaluate the accuracy of any information found in this presentation. Every case presented is of their own experience, applied by themselves for themselves, and it applies to their case only. Every person experiencing health problems should seek professional medical advice and consult their course of treatment with a doctor. The processes of plasma balancing described herein are a natural process which supports the body but does not replace medical advice or therapies one is already subject to.
Thank you, everyone. So, I have to share again. Is that what it is?
Yeah, every time now that you change screens, unless you're on a PDF presentation, which I think you will, once you go into this one, you won't have to share as you switch screens. We still see it, yeah. But if you're bringing in separate backgrounds, they have to be shared individually at this point. I haven't figured out the other way to do it, multiple screens.
Okay, so you're seeing my screen?
Yes, sir.
No, you're seeing the wrong screen.
I'm seeing Kesh American Knowledge Team 2024.
And you're seeing the next slide.
I'm not seeing the next slide yet. I'm seeing Mr. Kesh's picture to his left, KFSSI emblem.
And the 3 books.
Yeah, but you're also seeing the next slide. It's not showing the presentation view. Try this again.
There.
Hmm?
I mean, it's changed a bit, but still Mr. Kesh is there. Now we're back to the original.
I'm so sorry. I just...
We can briefly pause the recording, Alex, if you'd like to just run through it so you feel comfortable.
You know, I'm going to change. It looks like I have to change the window. Let me try this.
Yeah, there you go.
Have we got it now?
Well, it's changed, but Alex, all across the bottom on the previous one was each slide. Okay, but now we don't see those slides. We see Mr. Kesh, the KFSSI, and the 3 books.
And so this is the presentation view.
It looks like it.
Perfect.
Okay, well, it's one of these days we'll learn how to do this properly. Anyway, so thank you very much for everybody in joining us today. And I hope you enjoy this as well. It's a very important week. We've actually gone through a very crazy month, and we were starting to see the fruits of the labor, if you will, because we're all part of the process. We're all part of the Kesh Foundation Spaceship Institute. This is teachings on plasma science, and we've been discussing the intermediate transmutation. Today's subject is the Twinity of life. And my name is Alexander. I am from Canada. It is November the 10th, 2024. This is the Kesh Foundation North America Plasma Education Series. And one moment, please. So hard to believe that this is the intermediate transmutation session, and this is the 6th class of this particular series, which has been an ongoing series going back 4 years now. And the whole purpose of this is to try and condense the thousands of hours of teaching into what's turned out to be hundreds of hours of teaching. So it's still quite unwieldy, but hopefully we're all getting a little bit better organized, and we're going to continue to distill this down into smaller bites. But as the knowledge is moving forward, each and every one of us has to figure out our own way to describe things, because we are still in the vast minority, and there's so many people who can't even get to the point of understanding it because they're not even aware of the technology. And when they find out that we have been broadcasting for over 10 years, they are actually stunned to hear that. So we can see that we have a lot of work to do. So let's please carry on and understand that we are on the hesitancy highway. And of course, it's the lowest energy state. And this becomes very important to convey this message. You know, we're just on the donkeys and we're crossing this bonding highway. We have to figure out what is the bonding highway. And we find that maybe we need 2 tents for the evening. And this was a play on words, as was the fact that we're the masters of the universe. And it's not frivolous, you know, because we are under pressure from some of those who think that we need to go into a transhumanistic environment. And the problem is, what does it mean? It does not compute. So friendly people like to greet you and say, howdy, partner. How do you like me so far? And so this is our mission, is to search for outer space. And speaking of howdy partner, this is what we're considering, partnering with the Twinity on the plasma highway to our pie in the sky. And so there's a couple of problems with this statement. First of all is the partnering. Second is the Twinity. Third is the plasma highway. And our dinky little highway pie in the sky is kind of like the short end of the stick. Why are we satisfied with our little pie in the sky? And is that because we don't want to be greedy? But is that what the Creator wanted? For us to just have this little pie in the sky? So that means we have to be in a really tight containment area. And a tight containment area has a connotation of being a jail cell. And so I don't think the Creator wanted us to be in that, because as was described in the books of Meron Tevakol, like in book number 1, we're looking at the universal order of creation of matter. So that matter has to be in a containment. There's no question about that. But is that containment a jail, or is that containment a formation, a kind of containment of energy? And this is the thing that we have to understand, that there's a difference between our physicality and our energy. And so when we look at book number 2, the structure of light, it implies that the light is physical. And that's how we view the light because of the physical limitations of light. But the light is actually a transmission of energy. And so we see that the light goes between 2 matter states, but not only. It's just a reference, because these 2 matter states are part of what book number 3 is talking about, the origin of the universe, where 1 becomes 2. But what happens with these 2, and what happens thereafter? And so it's very appropriate that we're talking about the Twinity, because these 2 represent the Twinity. And this Twinity, now we can call it the Twinity of life, because when you're looking at the origin of the universe, we're talking about the origin of life. And so how do these two fields actually work? And this is the topic that we're going to do today, because when you look at the vertical people, the plants, if you will, and they seem to be well organized, and they seem to have definite fields and definite structures and different structures within the fields, in other words, overlapping fields. And we have overlapping fields. And one of those things is that we've been trying for 351 weeks to bring the one planet, one nation for justice and world peace, including one race, with the members of the Universal Council, as hosted by Rick Crammond. And we've been doing that because when you go into outer space, no one knows that particular place where you're at, but they might know the planet you're from. So we need to think in broader schemes. And where was the limitation that we started with? And so one of those things, of course, was the 10 Commandments. And this is what I grew up with. And now we've been referenced to 24 commandments. And so for me, and no doubt many, this is a revelation and a total different, shall we say, view of events. And so that's the difference between the plasma highway and our highway, which we're on the transmission highway, which, as we said, is the lowest energy state. And we need to understand that, because that transmission highway is the manifestation in the physical state. So how do we elevate into the next highway? Well, that's the transition highway. And appropriately, it's a transition, which means from higher to lower or from lower to higher. So therefore, you can make some choices. Isn't this wonderful? We all want to be able to make choices, but which criteria do we use to make those choices? And what is our ultimate goal, if you will? And if we say, well, that's to get to the transmutation highway, why? Is it something that we need to achieve? Is it something we need to strive for? Or are we already on the transmutation highway and we don't even really know it? And so we need to observe our physicality, because our physicality is our vehicle. And then we take our vehicle and we put it in another vehicle, which we call it a car. And then we take that car and go down the highway. But that car doesn't go down the transmutation highway. It just goes down the ordinary highway. And that's why we only get this piece of the MAGRAPH pie chart. So the MAGRAPH pie chart is a bringing together of the universal order of creation and creation of matter. And so we interpret that through the speed of light, and we understand the error of that kind of thinking, but it has been ingrained for over a century, and it is still being taught in school. But what we have to realize, it may be a constant transmission, but it has a variable transition. There are different colors. So if each color of light is traveling at a constant transmission, how can it have a different color? Or is the speed of light, the way we know it, just part of the pie, and that's all we can see? And it is the most important part of what we can see. And the rest of it, which is the universe, which is light years away, well, that is so far away that, we can't see it. But is it the fact that we're disconnected, or are we conflicted in a zone between what we see as the affinity and the prejudice? And so what does that mean, the affinity and the prejudice? Well, we have relationships and we have to make choices. So the basic choice is transmission. And so we have the three dimensions, the X, Y, and Z axis, which are the dimensions of transmission. But that's the lowest energy state. And so there are higher energy states. how do we get to that higher energy state? And then what kind of state is it? Well, we find that it too is a transmission state. So to go from one transmission state to another transmission state, we have to go through a transition dimension. And that transition dimension has to take into account all three dimensions, the X, Y, and Z axis. And so once we navigate through this transition dimension, we get to another level. Well, there's another level still, and that's the transmutation dimension. That's what we've been talking about. And we've only discussing basic intermediate transmutation. So we're only dealing with the duality of the X and the Y axis. And we're still kind of trying to figure out what is this medium, and we can't even get to the message, but we'll get there, because now we understand that there's two feeding dimensions, and those two feeding dimensions have always come up with an answer, and that answer used to be 1 and 1 is 2, but now we find it's more than 2. And how come? What happened to our math? Well, the thing is that the first one is still there, and the second one is also still there. But the thing is, the first one and the second one are not necessarily the same one. We just treat it that way. So if we were to say that 1 plus 1 is a twinity, and the answer is the life, and the 3 together is part of the feedback. And so this becomes a very important understanding, because we're none of these 3 dimensions, because the feedback is to us, and we are the observer. And as an observer, sometimes, well, we kind of round things off, and that's why we have this pi, which is 3.14, which is just a little bit, but it's a little bit, and we never know how much that is, so we're just going to fudge it. And so that means we're in the 4th dimension. And so this is where the problem lies, is because as the observer fudgers, we're the ones who are doing all the work, and we see the productivity of that work, and we see it manifest in our relationships. So in the plasma science, we're looking for a MAGRAV balance, which is the balance between the magnetical and gravitational field forces. And so that's just a general relationship. But scientifically speaking, they've isolated between the conservation of magnetic fields versus the conservation of energy fields. And then, of course, there's that other scientific community, the spiritual community, where they're still grappling with the connection between the spirit and the motor of the soul. And then, of course, where does the plasma science fit in? And so we have to understand that we're adding to that knowledge and bringing together the relationship between these two sciences and putting it into a balance. And when we say into a balance, we're not talking about a balance where it's equal and nothing happens, because things are always happening. And that's why it's not a singularity, it's a duality, where you have the one side, which is a magnetical susceptibility, and the other side, which is a gravitational susceptibility. And so if we're talking about susceptibility, that means there's some kind of variables. And we find that these are independent variables, but not only are they independent, not only are they variable, but they're not physical, they're plasmatic. And so the plasmatic variables contribute to the conservation of susceptibility, where you have the magnetical variable plus the gravitational variable on the one side equal to the magnetical variable and the gravitational variable on the other side. And so that kind of contributes to that duality. And the duality is not the same as the twinity. When we look at the cups of life, and the two most important cups were the first cup and the second cup, and we set up the cups with copper coils and zinc plates, and we nanocoated some coils. And so we introduced the nanocoating process of the monatomic science. And we were able to do this in our homes, and we didn't need expensive equipment. But what we found was that a reflection of our emotional strength, which emanated from our inner space, that core space in some place that we have always referred to as that nebulous point somewhere here or there or out in outer space, or who knows where, not defined. Okay. And yet here we are, we're able to produce an emotional strength and a physical strength as represented in the cups of man. And so the first cup was the emotional cup, and the second cup was the physical cup. And when we put these two cups together, the field strength emanating from these two cups represented the kind of field strength that we need in our physicality. And so there was clearly a difference between these two cups. So we understand that the physical is something we can touch, and the emotional is something that we feel. And not from that kind of touch, but we get touched in another way. So then we introduced the twin cups. And so the twin cups, again, manufactured from the one cup, which included a copper coil, a nano-coated copper coil, and a zinc plate. So that is the same as the emotional cup configuration. And then we created a second cup identical to the first cup. So this is different from the cups of man. We have two emotional cup configurations. And then we take the outside non-nano-coated elements and we connect them together. And then we connect the cups where we connect the non-nano-coated ones together, one to the nano-coated coil of the other. And we repeat this connection in the opposite direction for the other to the nano-coated coil of the first one. And this is the twin cup connections. So if we understand that the twin cups are actually two emotional cup configurations, so now we're talking about a completely different set of circumstances. Still producing GANs, still producing plasma, and still, as we see from the cups of GANs, that we can have a radiance manifestation of a variety of GANSes. So this much we know. We can produce the calcium and the copper and the carbon and the zinc, but we can also produce the water and the amino acid. And in addition, we can have any GANS radiance manifestation, even gold and even exotic elements. So this really changes the scope. And so if we look at the earth GANSes, these are all the prejudicial GANSes that we find on the prejudice table. We call it the periodic table of prejudice because why? It's prejudice to earth. And it's a good thing because we're prejudiced with earth as well. And so interestingly enough, the makeup of our physicality mirrors that makeup of the earth space. And this is an important thing to understand because that is the common denominator. So when we talk about common denominators, we have to understand that there's two matter plasma dimensions. So one is physical and one is plasmatic. But the plasmatic dimension is right next to the physical dimension. And that is the key because there is a bond. There's a bond between the plasmatic and the physical connection. And so we have to understand that the physical is the feedback and the plasmatic is the feeding. And so we have grown up, been trained and conditioned to be feedback dominant. and preoccupied with the matter-plasma dimension. Now, the matter-plasma dimension is kind of a unique structure, very welcome. I mean, let's face it, we're all enjoying our physicality, but it's manifest from the principal matter, which are the PM ticks that are traveling through outer space in their magnetical format, which is an energy pack. And as a nice pack, it needs to be parceled so that it can come together, and we see the antimatter, dark matter, and matter gen come together in the plasmagen conversion. And so that is still in a plasmatic state. When does it get into the physical state? Well, you see, now we need some kind of twin reference. And when I say twin, that means common denominator. And so we find that with the earthbound state, which too also has its MAGRAV condition, which is the magnetical gravitational balance. And if we take our plasmagen state and the MAGRAV field state of the Earth, so we have two field interactions, this we call inertia, and this becomes the manifestation in the physicality. And so this physicality is different for all of us because there's principal matter interaction, which is coming from all different directions and in all different flavors. And so they come together and they interact together and they go through this manifestation process. So many different principal matter interactions became part of this principal energy flow. And so we have to understand it's a two-way street. And what is going on that two-way street? Well, it's this energy. And since this energy cannot be stopped, and it all has to be always in motion, so then this becomes part of the two-way transmission and, of course, two-way transition. And so it manifests us as the blue planet, reflecting, of course, the fact that we're the water planet. And so this is what we emit. And that emission is a manifestation of our emotion. And as a result of that emission, this is why we were able to make that connection. So there is an affinity between our manifestation and the manifestation of the planet. And so this becomes not only part of the affinity, but literally part of the prejudice because we preferred Earth as opposed to Mars. And there's a reason for that. And a lot has to do with the relationship and the susceptibility in the magnetical gravitational relationship. And that is determined by another relationship, and that is the principal interaction between the sun and the earth. So it too has a two-way emission of intention. And as such, there's a covalent bonding connection, which we can't see. So that each and every planet has this covalent bonding connection, but each and every planet has a different bonding connection. And so that's why we have the difference in the radius of the orbit around the sun, say between Venus and between Mars. And there we are nestled in between our third rock from the sun. And so when we try and understand this matter state and we say, okay, well, that's an affirmation of life, but we only see a part of the life, which means that we're actually denying life because we don't understand these bonds. There are all these points, and these points all bond together. And each point has a tensity of containment. We've discussed that. And each has a mass relationship. And each point is a registration. So how do they all work together? Are they a point of conflict? Or should we be looking at conflict resolution? Because in that case, then we can achieve a point of containment. And that point of containment becomes the covalent bonding that we need. And so that it becomes part of the energy binding process. And this is a very important self-serving requirement because each and every one of us, in order to maintain our matter state condition, We have to have a binding of energy in a self-serving manner, but not at the expense of others, because that clearly violates the laws of conservation. Because when you steal from others, and if they don't like it, and then you kill them in the process so that you can steal from them, they are depending on this energy binding, and you're depriving them of that. That is a clear violation of the laws of conservation. So you can pick any of the 24 commandments and take your pick. And of course, tomorrow we need to remember why they talked about in Flanders fields where the poppies grow, because that was not to honor the dead. That was commemorating the need to stop the pointless wars. We have to honor the flower of the living. There's no honor in war. The plasma rule, the higher strength feeds the weaker strength. It seems to be contrary to the earthbound rule, the higher strength eats the weaker strength. That is a law of diminishing returns, isn't it? If you're of a higher strength, why would you want to eat something of a weaker strength? You are what you associate with. And if you surround yourself with stronger, you too will be stronger. That's the plasma rule. So you find that that binding zone develops a tensity, and each binding zone has a mass. And with it, it has to have a covalent bonding zone. And so it has to convert to the containment of that tensity. So two fields coming together, not as a conflict point, but as a containment point. Even a stone has a soul. And so we disregard that because we use that for anchorage or for commemoration so that we can idolize. And all that is acknowledgement as a confirmation of our position, as we said, the third rock from the sun. But that is an emission of declension. In other words, lowest energy state. And so we need to transition from that bond age of chains to covalent bonding in a plasma state. And so we do this through the conservation of susceptibility, where we have this x-axis relationship reflecting in a y-axis transmutation. And so we find that things are moving around us, and things, of course, are moving within us. But then, of course, we also can do the movement. So there's a lot going on, and we try to understand the greater oneness, and we see a form developing. So there's a path that we can go along this. And so what are the defining characteristics of traveling along this path, and which way are we going? And it seems that we're just going in a spiral. And so that becomes the spiral of oneness. So we have a outward boundary of this spiral, and we have a core boundary of that spiral. And so those are two ends of this spiral, which kind of looks like a long tube. And we can go down there into the tube and see what is going on. But what is going on, of course, is in order to make this curvature, there has to be a folding. So when we say folding, we seem to think of a flat folding with a crease. You fold paper in half and you create a crease. But there's another kind of folding, and that's just a bending. And the action has the same result, but in a different form. And so we have to differentiate between what we see as the animate form and the inanimate form. And so it boils down to where protein needs folding, whereas a polymer is linear. And that is the difference between these two creations. So when we look at the surface to volume ratio, and we see that it depends on the negative charge, so we find that the moment we put a bend in the road, it creates a new negative charge. So there's a difference between the linear transmission and the bend in the road. But that bend in the road doesn't have to be a sharp bend. It can be a gentle curve. It's still in two dimensions where you have both ends are negative, but now that bend is negative. So now you created more charge points. And so if we understand that these are all patterns, and as a pattern, it needs a template. And if we can bend it, in other words, create a form from these gentle curves, and we can do that in two dimensions, and then we can create a coiling. We can use that pattern template to begin a spiral growth. And so then we can create two forms, a form of containment. And then that continues to grow, and you end up with this tubular form artifact, which is kind of a coiling. And so within this form of containment, we can have this tubular coiling. And so we can go around or we can go through the tube. And as organic beings, we see that we are not linear, but we can progress in a linear fashion by maintaining a balance. So in other words, there has to be a polar flipping in order to maintain that balance, because otherwise there would be a prejudice of bending in one particular direction. So being organic beings means we have a manifestation that comes from the pattern of the basic DNA. And the basic DNA is, of course, interacting with the basic RNA. And so there's an interaction there. And the point of it is that there's a spiral, there's a coiling, and there's a rotation, and there's a twisting. And so we have this channeling that we can go down the tube. But as I said, we can also go around. And so we find that this DNA spiral has both a linear context if you follow the path, but it also has a bending if you look at the curvature of the spiral. So when we look at polyunsaturated fatty acid, which is the next level from the amino acid, we find that it is linear, but it is not a polymer, it is a protein. So as such, it creates a bending. And as such, in that bending process, it can create protein. And in the byproduct of the creating of the protein, we can create water. And we know that this is possible because oil and water don't mix. So when we look at protein, protein comes from the amino acids, which are the building blocks. So 3 amino acids are the foundation. Let's remember that. And then a 4th amino acid causes the folding over to make the protein. And as we said, the byproduct is water. So what happens with the soul of the mind? Are we of two minds? Are we too intense? Are we in two tents? Are we in two camps? Well, interestingly enough, when we look at the plasma fields and how they overlap, So we have the physical rotating balls of the plasmas. Inside the balls, we have the ganses. And then we have the small m matter state, which is the physical aspect of the magnetical gravitational relationship. And we have the GAN state, which is also a physical manifestation. But then we achieve around each ball what we call a plasma state. And so each ball has its own plasma state, and the interaction of all of these plasma states creates a dynamic plasma state. And that dynamic plasma state is not physical, and it is not GANs. In fact, it has no matter state component. It is a product of the dynamic plasma state. So let's remember that, because what we're talking about is a star formation. And today we're talking about the star formation of life. So if we look at the 3 in the foundation, and we look at the 1 above, and so that is your star formation, we find that that is a star formation that we can relate to in the matter state. But then we take the dynamic plasma state and we find there's a new relationship, and that is exclusively in the plasma state with no part of the matter state. And so that's the difference when we look at how we go around this earth and how each of us, we were not in a linear form, but we are in a circular form. And when we look at our skull and we find that inside the skull, we contain the brain, and the brain is the home of the soul. And the communication of the soul somehow has to interact with the physicality. So somehow it has to go through the boundary, and that boundary is the supragranular layer, which consists of 3 layers of cells that are interacting with both matter state and plasma state. So there is a matter state reference, and there's a plasma state reference. And so that becomes part of the twinity. And in that twinity, we see spherical fields. And so we have to understand that these fields are a GANS manifestation because we are filled with GANS. And so we understand that each of our organs is also a GANS manifestation. So we can understand that there are overlapping plasma fields. And each of these fields is a maggrav. And each of these magravs are working together through some kind of covalent bonding. And so these fields are the registration books. So you can go into that and see that's a kidney, that's a heart, that's a liver, and that's a brain. And then there's an interaction of these spheres with other spheres. And so we can say, well, it's a pole to pole, north to south pole, or from the south pole to the north pole. And don't forget, there's also the tunneling that goes through the center. And so that becomes the polar point of view. But somehow the energy is moving from one sphere to another sphere through what we call a maggrav energy transfer state. And so there has to be a balance. And so from the mass point of view, we see that there's magnetical gravitational balance on one side and a magnetical gravitational balance on the other side. So both sides are in a maggrav state. Both sides are different. Well, how can they be different? We have to take other things into consideration. So the conservation of the plasmagen state dependency means that the matter-gen is a two-way street of equality. And so we see that we can't just go from one side of the equation to the other side of the equation and expect equality. We have to understand that we can go through different field states, different energy states, such as the basic atomic state, the nanostate, and the GAN state. And then we can look at the conservation of state dependency and come up with what can be a balance. So if we start to take a look at this pH table and we see, well, wait a second. So we can see that there's a relationship on the atomic state, the nanostate, the GAN state, and the plasma state. And they all have this same relationship, except they're on a different energy state. And so if we understand that, then we can understand what is the difference between C8, C9, C10, C11, and C12, with C12 being the physical state of what we call the carbon state. And the rest of them are the isotopes. And then it continues to C13, C14, C15, and C16. And then we see there's a balancing from one side to the other side. And then, carbon being an element, then we have compound molecules, right? And these are the ganses that we see. And so we get other products like CH3. And then we get multiples of the elements like C60. And then we have other atmospheric products like NH3. So we see that even though we are in a balanced state, we can create different elements and different compounds, different molecules. So therefore, the twinity is not linear. So the balance of the magrav in its physicality is the lowest energy state. And as we deviate from this lowest energy state, then we find that we can transition into a higher energy state. And from there, we can transition into still higher, and then transition into still higher. And where is the ceiling? I don't know. How big is large? So we take that basic transition and put overlapping fields together. And it seems kind of confusing. As long as we understand that the left side balances the right side, and to compensate for that, then we have to have the capability to go through different energy states. So then we see that we can have a different intensity, a different density, and in different relationships. And so we find that the isotope, say for carbon-14, is the matter state of the nitrogen-14. And the isotope of carbon-16 is the matter state of oxygen-16. And the isotope of carbon-15 then becomes that in-between state of carbon with 3 hydrogens. And then, of course, on the other side, we already talked about the nitrogen with the 3 hydrogens. And so what we're seeing in these is star formations. But now, when we're looking at the relationship, it's a nonlinear twinity. There's a bend in the road. And this bending is very, very important, because that's the difference between us being a polymer or us being an animate being. And so this is how we can transition we have different MAGRAV conditions, and there's a relationship. This is how we move along the transmission line. And then if we understand that it is not just linear transition, but spherical with a spiral format within a field of containment. And so this becomes the manifestation of the nonlinear twinity. And so now we understand better the flow of will, where we seem to converge through the registration of limitations, so that in historical terms, we saw Goliath intimidating David, and David in his wisdom intimidated a stone. And then we found how the stone intimidated Goliath. But there's another way to have a result in the manifestation of wills, by registering the unlimitations, because man cannot abandon the soul. Some may choose to ignore the soul, but in the twinity of life, there's a physical inertia field of connection. In other words, the feedback of the physicality comes from the feeding of the twinity of life. Because the twinity of life is a plasma condition, exclusively in a plasma condition. Whereas we are in a matter state condition where we have the duality of the emotional state and the physical state. But contained within us is the Gans state, which also has the duality of the physicality and the plasma state, because the Gans has an affinity with water, and the Gans has an affinity with the emotion. So as we said, the Gans is a lie detector, because the Gans is a manifestation of the emission, of the emotion, of the soul. So the twinity of life has an emotional connection. And since our journey involves a past tense and a future tense, our manifestation is in the present tense. And it's not a linear extrapolation to go from the past to the future, because today is the beginning of the future. And today is the end of the past. So if we understand that we can manifest our present based on the twinity of life, then we understand that we're more than two dimensions. And so there's other things going on, more than just a basic emotional connection of the emotional star formation. And so we understand that there's spherical growth in 3 dimensions. But these 3 dimensions, now we understand, have to go in 3 dimensions. And so we see how the soul of the mind is created from the interaction of the soul of the man with the soul of the earth. Because without the earth, we cannot manifest in our physicality. And so it's within that twinity that the soul of the physicality has a relationship. And then we take that twinity and we understand that there's a dual process. One, we've already talked about the manifestation of the earth as a result of the interaction with the soul of the sun and the soul of the earth, manifesting the physicality of the earth. And now we have a destination. And so the soul of the man and the soul of the physicality can manifest in the twinity, the inertia field of the physicality of the man. And that's where the twist comes in. And so we can literally say the manifestation is from the top down. And if we haven't been doing that, we've been doing things backwards. And what does that mean, backwards? Does that mean we can only go one step up from our atomic MAGRAV state, which we've grown up to understand? Step up to the nano state, we make the cups of life. Step up to the polyatomic GAN state, which we saw the byproduct in the cups of life. And then the plasma state field, which is an emission of the emotion coming from the GAN state, and then relieve ourselves of that and go even one step beyond. But what about the other side, where we have the barrier of the physicality? Well, we have to understand that this is a tubular process. And so we found at the conference in Sanya, where we can produce gold the same way the earth does. But not only, there's so many things that we can do, because based on the law of conservation, we have to understand path link and susceptibility. So it isn't about distance. It's about the emission of attention, which is magnetical, and the emission of retention, which is gravitational. So this interacts to create the emission of intention. And we have to consider nearness and proximity so that we have a covalent bonding of fields that is contained within their tensity and their mass. And so this becomes the registration where did we determine this registration from? And we find that it's the registration of the wishes of the Creator. And that's what's one step beyond. One step beyond the plasma vision fields. That vision is our vision. That vision is the vision of the creation. And that vision is one step beyond in the other way as well. Because whichever way you go, it's creation. So we understand now that the pH of the Twinity registration is not linear. And the transition is not linear. There's more to the y-axis transmutation dimension. And so there's a problem here where we're looking at the transition range and the transmission element susceptibility. And we see the gaps. Well, these gaps are very important because they allow for the transmutation. And so the range transition transcends the y-axis transmutation dimension. And the laws of conservation govern the covalent bonding attributes. So they transcend the different energy states. But the containment requires a gravitational tensity and mass. We cannot abandon the soul of the man. Too many choose to ignore that. But in the final analysis, we're in the post-March 15th of 2024 era where we can make choices. There's a new selection process. Understanding our bountiful Earth space and how we got here from that transmutational space of outer space. And the only way we could do that is with that graceful space of our inner space. And that's not just our inner space, but that is the inner space of the universal community. So our gravitational confirmation is understanding the elemental element of hydrogen and how it gives off its unique emission spectrum fingerprint, which is clearly an emission from the magnetical gravitational force fields of the sun interacting with the magnetical gravitational force fields of the earth, and also interacting with the wishes of the creator, who is also emitting magnetical gravitational field forces. So here we are, we have the gravitational confirmation, and here we are trying to figure out the different cornerstones of science. And we find that not only are there different energy states, but there are different fields. So we have nano and pico and GANs and plasma and the soul cornerstones, all channels for the emission of intention, all overlapping. So the transmission spectrum is going from the non-visible speed of plasmatic rotation to the visible transmission spectrums. So we're seeing the surface superficiality of the physicality coming together with the internal substance of the plasma substrate. But we have to understand that this point of containment of plasmatic interaction is not linear. There's a curve. And this curve allows us to go one step beyond the magnetical side, beyond the gravitational side. And the balance thereof is that point of plasmatic interaction wherever we are in that universe. So when we're talking about the maggrav, we have to understand that this is all part of the transmutation transition. And that's how we bring the plasmatic fields together and how we interact with them. If we're interacting with them, then we are part of the Twinity. We are a product of the Twinity. We are part of the Twinity. The blue planet is part of the Twinity. And so the emission of intention transmutes in both the micro and the macro, which means there are many points on the field strength of the dove. There are many ways to achieve peace. So peace is available in every dimension, in every field strength. War is not. That's the message. And as we continue, starting in November with the nutrition and wellness transmutation testing, join us. Here we have another 3 sessions coming down the line. We're also embarking on the research. We're just at the beginning, really. And the only reason we're at the beginning is because for millennia, we have ignored the truth. And so for 563 weeks via the Knowledge Seekers workshops, we've been trying to transcend these limitations, the limitations of nuclear science, and making the connection to the greater oneness. And the greater oneness is that pie in the sky. And we don't need just a piece. The whole pie will do. Thank you very much. This is the Keshe Foundation Spaceship Institute Teachings on Plasma Science. So we're welcoming all the beautiful knowledge seekers learning about the new selection process of the new plasma science. Yes, there's a world peace treaty. You need to sign it because that's the ticket to the universal community. And you can't just sign it with a pen and ignore your soul. That doesn't work. in the plasma reality, because man is a reactor of a three-dimensional transcendent universe. And what exactly gets registered through this field transmutation? Can man go into outer space without a peace dome? Can we transmute through the dimensions of history? Too many questions? Well, you see, many combinations exist of the x-axis and the y-axis sphere creation. And there's a partnership with the Twinity. That is the priority of the physical transmission dimensions. So we don't have enough. The plasma science needs to be delivered daily via the Peace Dome in exchange for peace on Earth. So welcome to the new outer space age. It's not only the end of the lesson, and this is the end of the intermediate transmutation series. I hope you enjoyed the journey. Thank you so much for allowing me to continue to present.
Thank you, Alex. Let's turn to our participants and see if there's any questions or comments. It doesn't have to be on what Alex just presented, but it would be nice if it was. As I said before, Alex, this transmutation is a big word. And most of us probably think we've never even done a transmutation in our life. So can we demystify this a little bit more? Can we say the transmutation is a definite part of our lives, which we haven't recognized, we haven't become aware of, and now with the teaching of the KAKT Foundation, we're starting to realize that transmutation happens in our life on a very regular basis. I'm thinking of the energies of the dream, the feeding dimension, communication. Sometimes you have a feeling that you get a feeling of you need to reach out to someone, and they tell you, I've just been thinking about you. Isn't that a coincidence that you called me? But of course, now we're knowing there's really no coincidences in this whole process. And then, of course, a full transmutation, which Christ showed us, which most of us, including myself, have missed. So can we demystify this transmutation is not something that's out there, but it's something that's going on? I was thinking what Mr. Kesh said about the Native Alaskans and how they sort of have a very narrow diet in a way, but yet they're not lacking anything. Aren't we doing some transmutations within our own body? For example, if we're short on zinc, we could transmute copper in this vacuum condition that we're in. And so the transmutation should not be seen as something everyone else could do or other people could do, but I can't. You're already doing many, many different types of transmutations in just your daily life. We just haven't recognized it. Would you like to add anything on that, Alex?
So this is a very important point that you brought up, Mark, because it just shows how observant we are. So two points that come to my mind. One is you already brought it up about the dreams and things like that. So without the explanation from the plasma science, it has always been a mystery to me, like what goes on while I'm sleeping.
Yeah.
And it's very important to sleep in a safe place so that because you are very vulnerable when you're sleeping otherwise. And of course, so we see that's a strategy in wars, right, is to make sure that people are sleep deprived. But the second thing, of course, is that when you go out and in Canada, for instance, the temperature drops down to below zero. 0 degrees Celsius is the freezing temperature of water. And yet we can maintain a body temperature. And we're not walking around with a electrical cord and wondering how long is that cord and will it stretch going with our distance. we have to really ask ourselves, where does that heat come from? So we are actually manifesting in physicality a heat source, and we can't explain it unless, you know, we're a plasma scientist, but we accept it, but we don't really. So this is where the problem lies. And the question then becomes is, why are we so dismissive of things that are obvious? So for instance, we can run, stones can't run. You know, we can jump, carrots don't jump. We can drive a car. We can make a car. We can make a plane. These are all neat things that we can do. But we can only do that on this planet. And yet, there's no explanation of how we came here. This is not right. Did you have to go through life without understanding how you got here? And then understanding where you're going? And besides even worrying about where you're going, question is if you're going. And if you're not going, then, you know, a lot of people believe that they're not going anywhere. So they are in what they call devil may care attitude. But isn't that where the problem lies? Somewhere, somehow, we are ignoring our own observations. We are ignoring the, shall we say, examples that nature is presenting to us each and every day. And, you know, we criticize people and their ignorance, or we may suggest that someone is less intelligent than someone else. And yet, when we walk in the street, we may see ants crossing our path. How can that ant be so tiny and have everything that we have? It moves, it eats, it works. It doesn't drive a car, but, you know, pound for pound, it's way stronger than we are. And it displays an intelligence. So, you know, if you say that someone has a pea brain, well, the ant's brain is a lot smaller than a pea. So how is that possible? Well, let's just not ask that question, because that question is inconvenient. It becomes inconvenient to learn. And so to make it more convenient, then we create what's called a bell curve. In politics, a bell curve is called democracy. Well, the majority will vote for mediocrity. And so that's what we get, mediocrity. And that's one of the differences with the United States of America. It's not a democracy, it's a republic where we can strive for excellence. And that's why it's a model for the rest of the world. And people denigrate it, disregard it, dismiss it. And they keep talking about seeking democracy, which is what the rest of the world has, when what they have is pure gold. And they don't know what to do with it. So Where is the teacher if it's not us? And even without the plasma science, where is the teacher? And so we find that the teacher is transgenerational. The teacher is embedded in our RNA. And the teacher is off course, willfully and skillfully off course, and unwilling to change course. And that's what's happened. So we're missing a partner, and that partner is the Twinity. And why does the Twinity work? Because the Twinity is in our capability now to create an environment that is giving us the field strength to increase our physical transmission dimensions. But that Twinity is nothing more than a replication of the Twinity that manifested us in the first place. And that is the direction that the new teaching has to go. And so, in other words, we're at the completion of the intermediate transmutation series and trying to keep up to date with Mr. Kesh. But he is going at a faster pace, a very, very fast pace. And there's a sense of urgency. And this is what we all need to realize, that we need to overcome this transgenerational deficiency within this generation. And we need to act accordingly. So the first thing that we need to understand is how to act and how to manifest and how this Twinity is working, because this Twinity is a unique characteristic of our existence on the earth, because apparently many in the universal community are not differentiating with this Twinity. They are simply locked in to the emissions of the Creator. However, the physical transmission dimensions are a unique characteristic. And this is where the problem was created in the first place. We have an attribute that is very unique. And that attribute, when used properly, brings peace and prosperity not only to the earth, but to the universal community as well. And failing to achieve in its fulfillment allows for the opportunity to be abused. And this is the problem. People make the choice to go seek abuse. And that is not available in, I don't care how many commandments you have. It is a violation of universal law. So that is, I think, obvious. Back to you, Mark.
Okay, I just want to read from about 144 in the 563. Our knowledge seekers are reaching a point that we can produce the plasma energy of the gold, which is a massive breakthrough in the world of science. And part of this is tested in November session and the rest. Creating energy in a plasma state is totally different than producing energy as a question mark GANs. Involves different structures, involves different technology and knowledge. But our body does it Automatically. Now we have found out how. So now the knowledge sits and we can produce the gold as a matter. We can produce gold as a protein. We produce gold as a protein of the vegetation. And we produce gold as a plasma. Doesn't matter. Silver, we do the same with calcium and the rest. Now, I saw the gold amino acids in Senya, which was applied on certain individuals there, not myself. Apparently, Klaus his hands were full of gold, Gans. But how could gold be a protein? Is there anyone have any? We can produce gold as a protein. I know this is what he described the amino acid of gold, which he showed. One was a stronger strength, again, back to the Twinity. But we never think of gold as a protein in the body of the man. Again, anyone want to comment on that? But
Yeah, Mark.
apparently, yes, please.
Yeah, so let's understand that carbon is well, let's go back here, right? So carbon has an affinity to copper, has a connection to copper, and that affinity has to do with the nanocoating of copper. So the thing about the nanocoating of the copper is that it is actually a carbon. And the silver and the gold are within the same column, but they're of a higher density. So what I'm saying is that if we can nanocoat the copper and come up with a carbon which helps with respect to our organic existence, by going to the silver, which is of a higher density, and applying the same process, then we can maintain that affinity with carbon, and then gold likewise. So it's the connection to the carbon and the hydrogen, which is part of the plasma reality. And from there, there's an interaction with the nitrogen and the oxygen, which is in the matter state reality. And the combination of those four in a star formation allows us to cross over from the plasmagen state to the mattergen state. So any connection is working. And then deviation from that particular action allows us to spread out to the other elements. So the point being is that when we look at the cup of man, there's a cup of emotion, there's a cup of physicality. And so the physicality is copper, and the emotion is zinc. And the two are very close together in terms of mass. When you look at the Twinity, both are emotions. Both are the cup of emotions. And so what we're looking at is creating a balance field between those two emotions. So when you have two plasma fields, the gap in between is another plasma field. That's how the Twinity works. And that's how the cells reproduce. That's how the cells are created in the first place. So there is a pattern, there's an energy field, and there's a replication system. And this is facilitated through the folding over of the amino acid. And it creates a protein. So, as is the carbon to copper relationship, is the carbon to silver relationship, is the carbon to gold relationship. So that would be the direct answer to your question.
Okay, thank you. I was again referring back to the native Alaskans where they have such a plain diet, but yet they're really not lacking of anything. And then I was hearing how when people have heart attacks, it's usually due to, again, this is probably a matter state explanation, but the lack of magnesium in the body. Someone was saying that the body will take magnesium from every other place to supply the heart when it needs, if it's running short of magnesium, apparently. Again, this could be matter state. But why, if we can transmute things into magnesium, would there be any heart attack, which is more or less a cramping of the heart? Why wouldn't there should be no heart attacks if if the body can transmute elements into magnesium and supply the heart, why would the heart end up having a cramp? Again, this is matter state explanation, but just thought we'd perhaps glean some of your thoughts on that.
So if we were to look at a sports team, and you have one team that is extremely talented, so they have exceptional physical skill, but they would be unmotivated. And then you look at another team, they don't have that physical skill, but they're highly motivated. How many times have you seen where the weaker team will actually defeat the stronger team?
Yeah.
Simply based on motivation. And so the motivation is a manifestation of emotion. And so we have to understand that the emotion operates on a higher field strength. And so if we're looking at the conservation of energy and trying to balance out the left side and the right side, so a smaller field of emotion can equal a larger field of physicality and maintain that balance. So that would be the direct answer to your question.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to step away for 30 seconds. Can you carry on?
Certainly. So what we have to differentiate is the boundary that we have between the matter state of what we call the capital M matter state, the plasmatic state, and the relationship with the small m matter state. And so we understand that that is a relationship that we can understand in our physicality. So our physicality really dominates. And when we created the star formation, the initial star formation has the base of 3 and the fourth at the top. And once that field starts to develop, there's a delay because it has to build up its rotational strength. And once it achieves and crosses that threshold, then a plasmatic field comes in between. And so if we were to go back just to the one and we see we created the rotating balls filled with GANs, and they created a plasma field around each one. So it was the interaction of the 4 plasma fields which created a dynamic plasma in the center. Well, that dynamic plasma state is the transition between the small m matter state and the capital M matter state. So that is a dynamic plasma state, and then that one dominates in the physicality. But the problem with this domination is that the base, the three in the base, are in the plasma, in the physical state, whereas the dynamic plasma is in the plasmatic state. And so as we saw with the diagram or the video of the three orbs above Israel on October the 1st, we only saw the three in the gravitational state. We couldn't see the fourth one, because the fourth one was in a magnetical state and it was in an exclusive plasmatic state. But without that fourth one, you do not have the star formation. And so this is the problem that we're facing in our physicality. We are not seeing the star formation of life because we are only seeing the gravitational field, the three dimensions in the foundation, and ignoring the existence of the fourth one. So we have to understand that those four constitute the interaction, the successful manifestation of the physicality between the interaction between two fields. What are those two fields? So those two fields are the soul of the man and the soul of the physicality, both of which are in the physical, in the plasmatic field, and then they manifest the physical field. But they're still in the plasmatic state, and they're still part of the equation. They constitute the fundamentals of the Twinity. So if we look at the top of the star formation, the basic star formation, then we see that there are twin cups, twin fields. It's these twin fields, depending on field strength, that manifest our physicality. So you say that one's the soul of the man and one's the soul of the creator. But the soul of the creator has an intermediary, and that is the soul of the man. So what does that mean? That means our physical manifestation is still restricted to the emotional connection of the lower star formation. And so we have to look to the connection to the higher star formation. So all we have to do is change our point of view, change our scheme of reference, and understand that we are always connected to the Creator. Because every day we hurt and every day we heal. The hurting and the healing in the physicality never takes a holiday. We cannot dictate the terms of the healing and the hurting in the physicality. We can only open ourselves up to allow the field strength of the soul of the Creator to shine on us. And if we understand how to interpret that emotional connection and to do it properly and to do it sincerely, then the physical manifestation will happen. And this is a tough lesson to learn within our generation. And if we understand how tough that is, then we can relate to how tough it is to relearn this on a transgenerational way. And what do we have to do to be able to do that? we have to eliminate the blockages, the obstacles, and the baggage, which we don't need to carry. All what we need to do is to understand that the past tense and the future tense are on different paths, and they go through the present tense. And so our present tense is the emotional connection today. And that's what matters. And the benefit of today is the historical reference that we have from all who have gone before us. And the benefit in the future is going to manifest from our actions today. And so if we understand that our actions are fundamentally important for the future, then we have to take into account who is going to benefit by that. Because it's going to be more than just our self-serving interest. And once we understand that our intention transcends our own self-serving interest, then we will find that it'll be more graceful. Because not only are we catering to our self-serving interest, but we would be catering to the self-serving interest of others. What does that mean? That means that the field strength of that self-serving interest will increase. We have shortchanged ourselves in our own desire to fulfill our self-serving interest. And so we go for the dollar and we leave the gold behind. Mark, are you back?
You mean penny wise and dollar foolish?
Yeah, a nickel holds up the dollar.
Claudia said this was one of my questions. Thank you, Alex.
Oh, I don't get a chance to talk to Claudia.
Hello.
I guess
I'm
she got
in-
her
I'm in the
chat
background
working.
today.
She got her chat working. That's good.
Yes, yes. I was talking with Gail and she helped me. One of the questions that I want to ask you, Alex, is about this is we didn't see the fourth light in the star formation. So this fourth is it's not the free plasma, but we can see. So we have more the free plasma that I think like worked like black hole to the missiles and like these missiles gave the energy to this plasma, the free plasma, and increase the energy of the star formation. Do you think that like change the energy for a bad energy to a good energy?
No, it was a completion of the star formation. The star formation includes all the components. So when we just see the three, and we can only see that because that's what we're seeing in our physicality. This is where the universal community has an advantage over us because they don't just depend on what they see in the physicality. This is why you can't lie, cheat and steal in the universe because they don't listen to your words. They look at the intention of the soul. And so if they're doing that, then the soul cannot lie. And so the manifestation of that plasma energy comes from the interaction of the soul of the creation of the creator and the soul of the man. That plasma energy is a twinity manifestation. That is the way the manifestation happens. We are always looking for the singularity. And what do we get when we do that? Then we get garbage. Then we have stuff to get rid of. And we only get half the pie. So there is no garbage in the universe. Everything is working together and it's always in balance. So if we have good intentions on one side, the balance on the other side will also manifest in good intentions. It'll be different, but it'll manifest in good intentions. So there's a little quirk and a little sleight of hand where they are correct in saying that they use the shielding for defensive purposes. But on the other hand, they were doing attacking. So, that's kind of twisting the narrative. So what we have to realize is that if you're going to be truthful, then, be truthful in the complete realm. And that way you don't have to cover anything up. You don't have to hide behind a curtain. You don't have to be ashamed, and you don't have to make excuses. And life is so much easier that way. And you find, when we're talking about examples in life, you just look at someone who is a chronic liar, and you find they're always making excuses. And you say, well, what a burden that is. So don't create that burden for yourself in the first place. So instead of, shielding Israel from the Israeli missiles, shield, your own people from those missiles. And they failed to do that. So that's where the hand was opened up. And this is what people have to understand. We have to look after our family. That's our responsibility. So, a busybody is busy if they're looking after other people's responsibility, and understand that when they're doing that, we're failing to do our responsibility. So we have to remember that the head of the family is responsible, and the family will benefit from that head of the family. But when the head of the family is not responsible and the family is suffering as a result of it, that's all you need to know. So you don't have to ask the question, why? Why is the answer? That head of the household is not looking after the family. And whatever that reason is unacceptable. And it imparts a limitation onto that family. So this is what we have to all come to the realization, that the willful and skillful limitation of our progression is not to the benefit of us as the earth family, but for the small schemes, power and glory, supposed legends of their own mind, goals and aspirations of nothing, just to lord over. And this is where another problem comes in, where we have the confusion between the Lord and the God. So I solved that confusion a long time ago, because then I had to ask the ultimate question, which Lord, how many lords, and which God?
I was talking with Mark this week. Maybe this technology is not for us, it's for other generations, and we are increasing the knowledge of this planet, I think. I think it's not for my generation, I think. It's a little bit confused, but
Well, I would like to change your mind on that point, because
yes, please.
I'm sorry?
Yes, please. Change my mind.
Change your mind? Well, if we look at the conventional understanding of a generation and say, based on life expectancy, that there's a limit to that. Well, so that's a life expectancy based on the physicality, but the soul is immortal. So
Yeah, thank you.
the soul is the boss. So if you wish and truly wish to overcome the generational boundary and understand it's not a mental boundary, but it's an emotional boundary, then, we can become transgenerational beings as well. So why that is important is because there are transgenerational beings. And so there are passages referencing that even in the Bible. And I don't know much what's in the other religious texts, and I'm not a scholar in those regards. But the point is that there are magical events that have happened and they go unexplained, and so, oh, we don't know what it's all about. And then we find the scientific community, they say the same thing. Oh, we don't know, where that came from. Well, we do know it came from the Creator. And the other thing we know is the Creator doesn't discriminate. So the Creator works with us, and we don't discriminate. If we're giving energy to our physicality, we are not playing favorites and saying, well, today the lungs are getting our preference, and then tomorrow, maybe tomorrow we'll help out the liver. Oh, and that pain you have with the knee, we'll take care of that next Tuesday. That's not the way it works. The soul of physicality takes care of business, all of it. And it depends on the source of energy. And so if we're operating in a state of deficiency, then you can understand how we're not fulfilling that mandate. But it's not for lack of trying. It's a lack of understanding. It's a lack of maturity. And so all we have to do is shift the focus and understand, first of all, let's complete the basic star formation. And let's understand that the basic star formation is being fed by the Twinity of life, which is the interaction with the soul of the man and the soul of the Creator. And once we understand that, then that is the key that opens up the door to the universal community. But not just for us, also for the universal community. They're depending on us to succeed. They are rooting for our team. I didn't know that before, and I've never rooted for that team because I didn't know to do that. But it's not a matter of our team and their team. We're all in the same team. We're all part of the universal community. I found that out very late in life, but I haven't been able to understand it or to explain it. But I didn't dare challenge it. And I don't need to challenge it. I just need to accept it, and I need to encourage it. And that's why I continue to do these classes, and I'm very certain I go out on a limb is one of the reasons the participants on this panel are so loyal, because they take from this and discuss in practical terms what they can take back to their individual community, because each and every one of us is burdened with the same task, and that is to awaken the rest. And so in the current events, we have all become unburdened So thank God for.
Thank you so much. Thank you, opened my mind. Of, and I felt your love in your words. Thank you.
Maybe change your mind, maybe a little bit.
Yeah. It's, it's good. Everything is good. Thank you.
Life is beautiful. It really is beautiful. So, we need to talk in those terms.
Okay, I think Randy has opened his mic.
I have a question, Alex. Is there a particular reason why on the?
Can you speak louder, Randy, please?
Okay, that's better now.
Thank you.
Better.
Okay, so on the picture that's on the screen right now, you have the dark state matter and the other one, they are flipped to the opposite side so it looks backwards. Is there a reason for that?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. What are you?
Okay, if you look at the slide that you have on the screen right now, and you look at the bottom elliptical thing that you show the dark matter,
Yes.
you have flipped the image so that the writing is backwards. Is there a reasoning for that?
No.
Okay. I just thought, that sometimes you're very subtle in your teaching, so just put that in there to see if they catch it or not.
Yeah,
So I caught
interesting
it.
you picked up on that. Yeah.
Well, the guys in the tent are seeing it from the front, right?
Right. Okay. Gotcha.
Okay.
So
Okay. How's that for an answer? Pretty good, eh?
I'll take that.
it's all about point of view then.
Oh, there you go, Gail. That's a great statement.
Yeah, we forget about that. Alex, I had a question regarding the spheres for the star formation, and also here we look at the spiral. And if I'm thinking in terms of the star formation with the spheres, and then I think of the spiral, and then Mr. Kesh mentioned that it was like a ball of yarn, and there's all kinds of bits and pieces, but they're all connected. So this is the simplicity view with the simple little flat spiral, two-dimensional, but the reality is that it's like the ball of yarn.
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
That,
Yeah,
that, that is
sometimes I'm not sure because all we ever do to help our easy understanding is we look at things in the two dimension and then when it comes time to really think, we're sort of a little bit lost. Um,
huge.
and at this one that we're looking at, okay, and we talked about the situation in Tel Aviv and so on. And there were the three manned, or at least we think they were manned, or they could have been projected from the plasma state. What was there? Were you talking about creator and the intention of the pilots causing the fourth part of that reactor? I mean, we have the star
No,
formation. No,
just the intention of the pilots.
just the intention. Okay. Well, that's called being with the creator anyway, isn't it?
No, because
Oh,
Twinity. There are two sides to the Twinity. There's the soul
right.
and the soul of the physicality. So the soul of the physicality is kind of in a transition state. It can focus exclusively on the physicality, but
Or,
to
yeah.
complete has to make a plasmatic connection. And then it can also change its focus and work in combination with the soul of the man and work with the soul of the creator.
Yes,
Why?
because do
Go
we
ahead.
understand that the soul of the man is in connection with the soul of the creator always?
That's correct. So there was a comment on Thursday which said pretty well straightforwardly that it's a lot easier to transmute between planets than it is to transmute within this planet. And that sounds kind of strange. Well, actually, it sounds a little strange to me because um, if we're going to another planet, what we need to do is ensure that the environment is conducive.
Mhm.
If the environment is not conducive, then we have to adapt our physicality to that environment, which opens up the possibility, and as outlandish as it may seem, that, for instance, we may have to have 4 legs instead of 2 legs, just as an example. And why would that be strange? Well, if you look at the breathing apparatus of a fish, they use gills, and you look at the breathing apparatus of a human, and we use lungs. So obviously there is that dual capability of respiration. And would we be capable of doing that in our physicality on this planet? Well, with our transgenerational indoctrination, we're going to say no. But if we introduce the plasma science and incorporate that within our genetics, then we can say yes. So that's the difference between where we are and where we are going. And so it seems to be a lot easier to be able to do this transmutation between planets than it is to say go from New York to Paris.
But I distinctly recall, I think, that he said it would be easier to transmute previously on this planet because the environment is the same. We'll have to find that at some point in time,
It
but that's
speak
what,
should
yeah.
be the case.
It should be easier to transmute on this planet because the environment is still the same wherever we go. It's still the same Earth environment.
That's correct.
And now he's saying it's easier to transmute into the universe. So
Because
we'll have to, yes, go ahead.
that's what we do when we sleep. When we go to sleep, we are as the soul is gallivanting across the universe. And why some of our dreams seem so strange to us is because the locations are strange. In fact, the whole interaction can be, very, very strange. It goes through all sorts of different phases. So it is not exclusively saying, "Oh yeah, I'm dreaming today. I'm in Italy. Tomorrow I'm dreaming that I'm in India." Well, uh, the physicality is not telling the soul what the itinerary is. The soul of the man is not stamping his ticket from the physicality. The soul of the man is organizing the events for the physicality to stamp the ticket in the morning. That's what we have to understand first and foremost. The direction and the point of view, as Gail says, where the intention comes from. It comes from the twinity of life with the interaction of the soul of the man and the soul of the physicality. And then it manifests in the physicality, and we wake up and we say, hello, we're here. But if we transmute the conventional way, that is to go from here to another planet, would we take our clothes with us? Because our clothes are inanimate. We are animate. And so the advance of the technology had to take that into account. So the new systems that we have implemented recently are able to transmute everything that we need, that we can see within our immediate sphere of need. And so that would be within our society. So we have to take our physicality, yes, and we have to take um, our investments and our baggage, and all of that has to transmute together. So how do we do that? We have to get within a field of containment, and that field of containment is a physical inertia field of connection. It takes care of both the plasma state and the physical state. And the physical state is not restricted to the physical animate, but it includes the physical inanimate as well. This is the breakthrough in the science. That particular point that I just made is referencing, and since we're going into the new transmutation series, is referencing the holographic manifestation of physicality. Fasten your seatbelts. This is going to be seriously exciting.
So if we're created in the image of the Creator, and the Creator created the fish, is that why our rib cage bear looks like a fish gill?
Isn't that an interesting point? Yeah, I see your point.
Well, it's
Well,
interesting if you put the fish in the vertical position and you split the tail, you see the legs. The fins on the tail are the toes, I would think, or the feet. The flippers on the side have extended to your arms. But yes, it's very, this is after we came out of the water, let's say, and onto the land because we had a emotion or a desire to feed on the land.
And I think I seen a picture somewhere where the bones in the flipper of a dolphin are almost like the fingers in a hand.
Mm. Yeah, I used to think, Alex, the soul does travel across the universe because this is what we heard from Mr. Kesh, but I'm thinking now the soul doesn't need to go anywhere unless you're doing a full transmutation of the physicality. It just opens up expands its fields of communication. Because once the soul leaves the body, I would think once the boss is gone, the business shuts down. We saw the man in the body enhancement unit there. He was on the moon picking up stones. But didn't his soul just create that environment within the brain structure or those fields? I don't think he actually, again, went physically to the moon. We saw the physicality in the structure, but yet the arm was moving as if it was on the moon, picking up rocks. So that's all it is. It's just like when you smell the flower in your dream, there's no flower and there's no smell. It's just transmuting energies to give you that image of the rose and the smell of the rose, I think. So to me, unless you're doing a full transmutation, the soul doesn't have to go anywhere. It's already connected to every point and every position and can create that structure within your own structure as if you were there. To me, at this point, just sharing that.
Well, you continue to amaze me, Mark, with your progress. That was a brilliant statement you made. Very impressive. Thank you.
How about someone else? Is there another voice who'd like to chime in here or join the conversation?
Well, I already joined, but
Thank you.
when we talk when we talk about transmuting, and we always want to go to other places, to me, I think it's very interesting if we tried to transmute into a volcano or, well, they talk about General Byrd, I guess, going into the beautiful green place at the North Pole. And what was it? Well, becoming a dolphin if you want, you know, going into the oceans. I think that's really transmuting. But
Remember, Gail, when we saw that lady in the transmutation center where she reported that she was part mermaid and part
yes,
human?
yes.
But you saw her body right in the system. She didn't go anywhere. She
But
didn't change into a mermaid.
she had the help of the system though. So she was able to stick around on the planet. So I just I mean I had an experience, but in the physicality of swimming and kind of breathing under the water at our uncle's cottage. And I was terrified. I thought, but I didn't think about it until I was walking down the road to my other uncle's cottage, and then I got scared, and I thought, oh my God, I will never talk. I'll never talk about it. So nobody ever knew, and I stopped it immediately because it's not something that should happen according to the way that we see our earth and the way we grow up. So, and
You put
I don't remember being a mermaid. It's just me.
no, but you put the brakes on,
Yes, definitely did.
and so
I,
that's what things we find with the electric motors is that they have this capability of dynamic braking. It brings it to a full stop almost immediately. And how many times did Mr. Kesh mention that motors would stop when someone entered the room that was I'm not going to say non-believer, but a stopper, in other words.
Had the wrong intention.
Yep.
so does that mean I had the wrong intention? Sorry.
We're not judging.
Oh no, but we are. We are. That is the wrong intention, based on the purpose that you wanted to achieve. So if you want to stay within safety and within your capability, then that was the correct intention. But if you're
Mhm.
now comparing it to the other possibilities and you say, well, okay, um, so now the circumstances have changed, so that now appears to be the wrong intention. So what do you have to do, to correct that? So you're not saying right or wrong based on good or bad. You're saying right or wrong, which door do you choose?
Yeah.
So in both cases, you're opening the door, which is, a positive affirmation. But now you have a different choice that you didn't know you had before. Well, how do you do that? Well, this is where we have to be more skillful. So if we have the confidence in that, then it becomes easier. That's really where the limitation comes in, is our lack of confidence. And that's one of the things that you've noticed with the progress in so many people on this panel. Their confidence level has increased. It's not to overcome a shyness. That's the shyness is, you know, a fear of showing a lack of knowledge. But we all have this lack of knowledge, so we're all trying to, if you will, grope in the dark and find our way. And the only reason it is dark is because the only thing that we can see is the light, and that's unfortunate. That is where our limitation comes in, and you see all the supposedly awake people, turn on the light, shine on the darkness, come out of the darkness. That all that does is it feeds that narrative. The when you close your eyelids, you don't become blind. You can still see. And that's one of the things that we've been looking for in the transmutation process, is to see the light of the soul of the Creator. And some of us have done that very easily. I have done it occasionally, but I won't say I've done it easily, which basically is an admission that many of my actions actually end up being as a stopper. So I'm my own stopper in that regard. However, I have made a lot of progress in other areas. And so that becomes a foundation and stepping stones to moving on to the next level. And we're all on that same path. And that's what makes it so wonderful, because collectively we help each other out.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you all
I-
for continuing to present. Did I cut you off, Gail?
No, it's okay.
Okay, so I'm amazed that we've been blowing through this series. I never thought I'd get this far in the teaching, but much of the teaching that we talked about today, I have discovered was originally taught in 2015 in the private teachings. So many of us are looking at this as kind of a new teaching, and it can't be farther from the truth. This is old school. It just, the new school has to open the doors.
In part of the 563, he said, and the plasma is a centrifuge. But we understand the centrifuge operates sometimes, or you can have a centrifuge in a vacuum condition or a centrifuge in the matter state. And I've never really considered this, where in the matter state, the heavier materials go to the outside of the centrifuge. But in the vacuum condition, which our body is in, which the space is in, the heavier materials go to the center.
No,
No?
the
Okay.
vacuum is in the core.
Excuse me?
The vacuum is in the core.
No, but in the vacuum condition, the centrifuge, the heavier materials do not go to the center, or they do?
No, they do not.
Okay.
No, this is why with the centrifuge, you find that the heavier materials are on the perimeter. And so as they continue to get pressed, they create a vacuum condition in the core. So that vacuum condition is now necessitating or has increased the susceptibility that it needs to draw energy. So energy is flowing into that, and we call that dark matter. We know that outside of the magnetosphere is also a vacuum. So this becomes a physics question.
Yeah.
How is it possible for us to have a vacuum on the outside and a vacuum on the inside, and for us to be balanced within our Gans position and our physicality?
Yeah, I'll just read this. In the world of science, in the physics, we create centrifuge. And the plasma is a centrifuge. It's dynamic and it's spherical. In a centrifuge, the heavier goes to the outside. In the plasma dimension, fields of the vacuum, the heavier goes in the center. And the more you go to the center, the field energy changes the position from the position of the creator. It's a separation, but in energy level, not in matter state level.
Ah,
Hmm.
okay. Now you have identified the two things. In the centrifuge, the plasmatic goes to the center.
The
Right.
heavier goes to the center. Yes.
In the plasmatic state,
Yes.
in the plasmatic state, what is it that is heavier?
If there's an answer, it's not coming to me at the moment.
Has your screen changed?
No, that I'm
The
aware of.
gravitational, if it becomes gravitational, is that what you're trying to say? Everything says gravitational on your screen, except at the
Right,
top.
right. It's gravitational. The density of the plasmatic field is gravitational. You're looking at the basis of the plasma science. It's a balance between the magnetical and gravitational force fields. And both of those fields are susceptible to change. And if you change one, you have to change the other. How can you change one and change the other when one is stronger and one is weaker?
Well, just a little bit more to understand. Claudia says, so the ethos comes back again. What do you mean, Claudia?
To increase the gravitational, you have to the ethos. If you increase your ethos, I think you will increase your gravitational fields
Would that be the
of
taking?
your soul.
One is pulling in and one is giving away.
But the soul of the man is more gravitational.
Well, everything I think is, otherwise it can't maintain its structure. Remember, what is it? The structure of the plasma is the gravitational minus the magnetical gives you the structure. But again, I'm just a sort of a novice at this. We have a lot to learn.
Minus the magnetical, how does that work?
That's one of the formulas I think he has used in one of the books. The structure of a plasma is equal to the gravitational fields minus the magnetical fields, which gives you your structure.
Since the magnetical field is smaller and weaker than the gravitational field, then there's a missing component to that equation, isn't there?
I don't see it if there is.
Well, it's not 1 and 1. Because if it was, then if the gravitational was 1 and the magnetical was 1, and if you just minus 1 from the other, then you've minused yourself into non-existence.
In
So,
matter state, maybe.
well, in plasmatic state also, you have to have the two. So the magnetical aspect of it is the giving of the energy, and the what remains is your structure. So the gravitational is what you need to attract. So in other words, the energy, the PM ticks, which are magnetical, are seeking a gravitational core. And so that is your plasmatic gravitational stability. that gravitational stability is maintained by keeping energy in motion. And so the magnetical field is what is emitted. And that magnetical field is constantly being emitted. So if you look at the energy of the sun, the energy is unconditional and it's consistent and it's catalytic. So it is always giving. That means it's always being replaced. So
Right, it has to absorb. Otherwise, if it gives too much, it will destroy the structure.
precisely. So it isn't giving in one direction. It is giving in its total circumference. It is universally giving. And that's why the planets are rotating around the sun. Because if it was only giving in one direction, then, maybe on Tuesday, the Earth would get something, and then maybe, there'd be 3 weeks going by, and then, oh, it's Jupiter's turn, Well, what do you do in the meantime? You just fritter away? No. So the Earth is getting the energy from the sun all the time. And this is one of the things that, we really don't understand, or we don't bring it into our discussion. The sun is shining during the daytime on the Earth. And we say, well, at night, the sun is not shining. Well, yes, it is. It's just shining on the other side. So the sun is always shining on the Earth. It's just that, we are now on the other side. So, and why is that? Because that is the way things work. We have a physical manifestation and we have a plasmatic manifestation, and we have a duality. We have an interaction with our own soul of physicality and its manifestation, and we have a soul of the earth and its manifestation. The physicality is impossible without the environment. So we have to take the earth into account to manifest that way. And so we find, regardless of which way the sun is coming in, whether it's day or night, we are still glued to the surface of this planet. And that's a good thing, because otherwise we'd have to learn how to walk with our hands and our feet.
Okay, any other questions or thoughts? Thank you, Alex. Thanks to everyone. Let me just take the screen. Are there any other questions, comments?
Stay tuned for the next exciting adventure.
All right. And we like to close with this, and we thank you all for the work you've been doing in the background. I think the stars are starting to come together. Again, it's not going to be easy, as Mr. Kesh said, but may you all be proud of the work you do and have done, and may you be proud of the person you are, and may you be proud of the difference you're making. As Claudia said, we may not see it in this generation. We're all hoping to, but we're certainly laying down a bridge and a pathway for others in the future to fully enjoy the technology. So, and as we've understood the transmutation, we can actually be here again for another cycle if we so desire. So if you want to see it, maybe that's the way you will see it. I don't know. But that is certainly an option. And then, of course, we have the three wise men, which all of the Christians more or less have missed, and this idea of thinking good, the idea of speaking good, and the idea of doing good. And this creates a beautiful shielding and, in a way, a protection for your physicality from the off-balance emotions that we often have within our structure that causes diseases. So again, putting the World Peace Treaty together with the ethos of the three wise men, I think creates a beautiful type of shielding, very similar to probably what we saw with the star formation. Again, isn't this a star formation? Thinking, speaking, and acting good. Easier said than done, but it's up to us to practice this understanding and incorporate it within us. So thank you all. I think the thing is coming together quite nicely. There's still much work to do in the background, but we thank Mr. Kesh for relentlessly, as he said, he's relentless in the pursuit of peace. And I'm sure he's been working triple overtime, as Rick mentioned in the last workshop, between all the different parties and trying to bring them all to this table of peace negotiations. And that's what he said, we'd negotiate peace in exchange for technology. And it certainly is being shown, and it's certainly right there on the table. So perhaps going into the new era, the new plasma technology, we will see the embassy in Washington, the Iranian embassy. We'll see our president going over there, collaborating and cooperating for this new technology. And hopefully we can change the course, as Mr. Kesh said. So we thank the Iranian leadership, we thank the American leadership, and all the other leaderships who want to see this go forward.